Good day, my name is Nonkululeko Khumalo, and I'm doing a recording in relation to the assignment that was given that is about the introduction of transformative and decolonization concepts and theories in the higher education context. We were given two articles to go through and discuss, and the article that was allocated to me was the one that was written by Professor Solashna Vandeya, and I did a little bit of research about who Professor Vandeya is, and of highlight is to mention that she is an NRF-rated researcher, she is C-rated, and she's also won numerous national and international research awards, and she's also formed part of quite a number of multidisciplinary research groups, and she's also a full professor and a director of the Center for Diversity and Social Cohesion at the University of Pretoria, and she's been with this university for the past 20 years. In relation to the article, the title of the article is Why Decolonizing the South African University Curricula Will Fail, and the article was published in the year 2019. Prof. Vandeya, I should mention, she's what we call a post-colonial thinker, which means she adopts an approach where she focuses on colonization era, or on the colonization era. She discusses concepts and she discusses events that actually occurred during the colonization era. And some researchers, when they take this approach, they either discuss a country that was colonized but is now decolonized, or they could be discussing a country that is still colonized. South Africa gained its freedom, and it's no longer a colonized country, yet there are some concepts, especially in academia, which are still influenced by decisions that were taken during the colonized era. Now, in relation to the introduction, Prof. Vandeya indicates that the education triad comprises of three elements. There's the learner, there's the teacher, and then there's the curriculum. And she's also mentioning that changing one aspect of the triad without due consideration of the other elements will not effect the desired change, meaning for the curricula to be decolonized, the focus must not be on the curricula only, but rather all elements within the triad needs to be considered, because each and every element does affect either negatively or positively the other elements within the triad. And also, what must be noted is the fact that so much change has taken place in relation to the demographics of the learner, and as a result, that should actually be influencing change within the curricula, but focusing on the curricula and the learner only won't be sufficient. There must also be focus in relation to the academic or to the teacher, who is the one who actually administers the learning process. She also carries on to mention that the academic is what we call an Achilles heel in this triad, which means the academic is the weakest link, because currently not much attention has been paid or has been given to who the academic is, what are their experiences, what are their concepts, what are their ideologies in relation to the concept of education and decolonization as a result. Now, the new policies and curricula that may be in place could be effective, but if the academic is not willing to administer these particular policies, they won't be effective at all. So, any attempt at decolonization or decolonizing the curricula, if it's just an attempt on focusing on one aspect, that will be a futile exercise and superficial and cosmetic in nature, because the academic is the agent of change in relation to decolonizing the South African university curricula. Prof. Van der carries on to quote Luckett, and Luckett, I quote, "Getting a degree in South Africa, in a South African university, is a form of mental slavery and colonization. We no longer breathe. We want to breathe. We want exercise. We must exercise the colonial ghost from the curriculum. We want relevant knowledge. We want to study African history. We want to reclaim our Black history," unquote. This is the feeling of students, because currently what they are going through is a situation where, as much as South Africa has gained independence and is no longer colonized, the curricula is still very much so old curricula. And students want to actually exercise the colonial ghost, and also they want to study relevant knowledge, they want to study African history, and they want to reclaim their history, be it Black, be it white, but they're at a point where, or they're at a stage where they want to reclaim their history. And also, the changing South African higher education context necessitates academics to adapt and develop a mentality of adapting to change. They can no longer stand by the curricula, or rather stand by the attitude of saying, it's business as usual. It no longer is. And also, academics are not merely a conduit of the curricula, meaning they are not just going to teach the new curricula. They must form part of the change, because they are part of the triad. And for the triad to be effective, all three elements need to actually be in a consultative process. They need to work hand in hand. And also, Prof. Van der indicates that her study, it explores how academics, as complex beings with identities, with value systems, with beliefs and lived experiences, how they can act as agents of change in relation to decolonizing the university curriculum. She also carries on to say, changing how teachers teach or how learners learn, and changing the curricula without changing the teachers, the classroom, the school, and the community might not achieve the desired result. What she means by this is, as much as focus could be on changing, your study material and your study content, if the classroom, which forms part of the learning environment, is not changed, if how the school runs and how it's managed, if it doesn't adhere to a decolonized curriculum or concept, then there'll be no change in relation to adapting and administering a revised and a decolonized curriculum. She also indicates that Fullan, in a 1998 and 2001 study, indicated that change involves three dimensions for it to have an effective outcome. Number one, in relation to decolonizing the curricula. Number one, new or revised material, including instructional resources such as curriculum, materials, or technologies, need to be in use. And then the academic needs to adapt new teaching approaches and pedagogies. And also, there must be an alteration of beliefs. There must be a process of change. There must be a process of adapting to the new decolonized curricula for it to be effective. And then she carries on to state that in relation to her study, the key objectives and questions are the following: understanding decolonization and decoloniality, understanding educational change, understanding the role of teacher beliefs in the diverse classroom, and also how do academics become agents of educational change and social cohesion. She also discusses the concept of changing mindsets and about compassionately engaging with diversity in educational spaces. And she also looks at instilling hope and sustainable peace. Now, in relation to an issue in the higher education context that connects with the current study, for me, it was the pedagogy of compassion. Now, what is a pedagogy? Pedagogy is defined as the combination of teaching methods, learning activities, learning assessments. Now, the pedagogy of compassion is about supporting the well-being of teachers and students, as both are crucial for a sustainable educational model that respects diversity, motivations, and future implications. And the pedagogy of compassion also brings together the attributes that define a progressive teacher and a transformative intellectual. Remember, we said the triad consists of the learner and the teacher as well. So the pedagogy of compassion, it brings together the learner in relation to how they're going to adopt and absorb whatever is being taught to them. And it also includes a transformative intellectual, an intellectual who's going to be an agent of change. And then teachers need to assume the role of transformative intellectuals rather than to be alienated by the current educational dispensation if they want to cause meaningful educational change. But unfortunately, academics who teach the very material which is supposedly a changed curricula or a decolonized curricula, they're receiving little attention. Yet their belief systems, yet their experiences, yet whatever they could have learned and whatever they could have lived through during the colonized era comes into effect in relation to their teaching styles and their teaching methods, and it actually impacts on how they're going to perform as agents of change, and it influences how they're going to be transformative intellectuals. Now, my personal reflection in relation to the study, the pedagogy of compassion helped me to analyze the particular concept of decolonization and also going through the article, because I was able to realize that, unlike what I thought before, when my understanding of decolonization was related to it, to a curricula that's going to be changed after being oppressed, my mind was focused on the apartheid era. I did not consider the fact that the educational triad or the education triad is a very important aspect to consider when one needs to decolonize the curricula. I now understand that the decolonization involves the learning cycle, which means there's a process of learning, a process of unlearning, and a process of relearning. Because whatever I could have learned in the past as an academic was learned during the colonization era. And for me to be able to be an agent of change and to be a transformative intellectual, I need to unlearn those various concepts. All academics need to unlearn whatever they had learned prior. They need to absorb the new decolonized curricula and relearn and actually understand and grasp the concepts that are going to be discussed under a decolonized curricula, and then be able to teach, be able to actually administer the new curricula to the students that we have currently. And as one knows, in order for teaching to take effect, there must be learning first. So the academic as an individual needs to learn, they need to relearn, they need to unlearn and let go of certain concepts that were influencing the colonized curricula, but rather to let it go and then relearn the new decolonized curriculum. In relation to the conclusion and the takeaway message, universities have done very little since 1994 to open up to different bodies and traditions of knowledge and knowledge making in the new in new and exploratory ways. Little has been done. As much as we can say as a country, we've gained our, we're now a democratic country. Little, though, has been done in relation to how universities can adapt their curricula. Little has been done in relation to how academics can actually be taught so that they can unlearn and relearn the new decolonized curricula for them to be able to impart new knowledge to their learners. And also, most South African universities have developed new policies and frameworks that address equity, transformation, and change. However, institutional cultures and epistemological traditions have not really changed. And the fees must fall protests that took place in 2015 to 2016 were actually the first attempt in relation to addressing these traditions that needed to change. And it was the very first attempt that was made by students, which only form 1/3 of the triad. For them, that was their input in relation to trying to decolonize the curricula. As indicated before, for the triad to work effectively, all parties must be involved and they must be engaged. In this slide, we've seen that over the period of 2013 to 2017, various researchers have indicated that the system education or the higher education system requires an overhaul in relation to changing the current educational system. And also, in 2014, Ramobi postulates that higher education curricula has to be decolonized so that it is not disconnected from African realities, including the lived experiences of the majority of Black South Africans, because it's a reality. South Africa is formed of different races, yet the African community, the Black African community, forms the bigger part of that number. And as a result, for the curricula to be decolonized, the African realities need to be considered. The African history needs to form part of the new decolonized curricula. And also, decolonization of the South African university curricula requires the following approaches and pedagogies. Number one, understanding that the education triad consists of 3 elements: the learner, the academic, and the curricula. And as much as, it's 3 various concepts, they work together to produce an educated individual. And if only one concept is considered and the others are ignored or they're not paid or given enough attention, then the curricula, the decolonized curricula, is not going to be effective because not all parties could have been engaged. For it to be effective, all 3 parties play an equally important role. And then the pedagogy of compassion comes into being, because a feeling and a concept of compassion where there's understanding, where there's adhering to diversity changes and adhering to adversity needs, it needs to take place. Active learning, problem-solving learning, and team-based learning needs to take effect so that all members of the triad can contribute towards a decolonized curricula. This particular slide shows a picture of an Africa that is decolonized, because the concept of being creative and being relevant and indigenizing the curricula took effect. So for the curricula to be decolonized, these aspects need to be considered. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you so much for this interesting topic. As I indicated before, whenever I thought about decolonization, my mind only focused on the curricula, and it only focused on apartheid challenges that one had gone through. I had not thought much in relation to the other factors or the other elements of the triad. And after going through the article, I now realize that for one to be able to understand this concept and for decolonization of the curricula to be effective, All elements of the triad must take effect. A pedagogy of compassion must be adopted, and a process of change, which includes the learning stage, the unlearning stage, and the relearning stage, needs to take effect so that academics as agents of change become tools that are going to transform the curricula, so that at the end of the day, the student can reclaim that the African history has been brought back to the curricula. Thank you so much.